Mrs. Matlack.
Here.
Mrs. Neary.
Here.
Mr. Rossi.
Here.
Mrs. Seidel.
Here.
Mrs. Scarpolino.
Here.
Mrs. Schultz.
Here.
Mrs. Tong.
Here.
Dr. Wong.
Here.
Mr. Goodwin.
Here.
Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay. First, we'll start off with the approval of minutes. And can I have a motion to approve the minutes for the regular action meeting dated December 18th and the executive session meeting dated December 18th? Mrs. Seidel and Mrs. Matlack. Can we have a roll call? Any questions or not? Mrs. Sugars.
Mrs. Matlack.
Yes.
Mrs. Neary.
Yes.
Mr. Rossi.
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel.
Yes.
Mrs. Scarpolino.
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz.
Yes.
Mrs. Tong.
Yes.
Dr. Wong.
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin.
Yes. Next, do we have any correspondence? Any items for correspondence? Pardon me? Okay. All right, we don't have any presentations for tonight, so we'll start off with our student rep reports, and we'll start off with Sonia for Wes.
Good evening. Here is an update report on happenings in the Cherry Hill West community since we've been off from break. On behalf of the West community, I would like to congratulate football athlete Carlos Gomez on his selection to the NJFCA All-State Super 100 team, and also to Joyce Moffitt-Klinuski on being named to the Philadelphia Inquirer's South Jersey Basketball Hall of Fame for the class of 2019. And I would also like to commend the following girls and boys track athletes for their outstanding performances throughout the season. Eric Dolan and Amaya Gibson Gardner, who both broke the 300-meter record. Ben Doherty and Nika Mitiel, who both broke the 600-meter record. Ben Doherty, who set a new personal record for the long jump. Kyra Randolph, who broke a 10-year-old school record in the 55-meter high hurdles. Kyra Randolph, Sana Pollard, Takira Gibson, and Maddie Engelman, who broke the shuttle hurdle record. Aldrin Bustanera and Carl Eberhardt, who both set personal records in the boys' 800-meter. And finally, Sam Beatty and Nick Saganik, who both set personal records in the boys' 1600-meter. In performing arts news, the West Vocal and Instrumental Music departments are preparing a variety of performances for this year's annual Broadway Night Show. The theme for the production is music from 21st century Disney. So come out on February 28th and March 1st for a night of singing, dancing, and entertaining sketch comedy. Also, the African American Culture Clubs at East and West will be presenting their second annual Black History celebration on February 23rd. The show is titled A Seat at the Table, A History of Firsts. Rehearsals take place every Wednesday evening from 5 to 7 p.m. and every Saturday morning from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. at Cherry Hill West. Elementary and middle school students are welcomed and encouraged to participate in the program. Also, congratulations to the cast and crew of the winter play Almost Maine on an excellent series of performances over the weekend of January 11th. Rehearsals are now underway for the live theater production 110 Stories, which explores the tragedy of the terrorist attacks that took place on September 11th, 2001. Performances will take place on February 8th and 9th. Rehearsals for the spring musical, Chicago, are also currently in full swing. Performances will take place on March 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 29th, and 30th. In miscellaneous news, the Latinos at West Club hosted a celebration at the Carmen Tillelli Community Center for Three Kings Day, a feast day that took place on Sunday, January 6th of this year. The event brought community members from many different backgrounds together to enjoy each other's company for the evening. Also, the West DECA program took 150 students to the Crown Plaza Hotel to compete in the 2019 DECA Regional Conference on Wednesday, January 9th. They all showcased their business leadership skills in various areas through role plays and presentations to judges. 44 of those students were selected to advance to the State Regional Conference in Atlantic City, which will take place from March 4th through March 6th. Are there any questions? All right. Thank you.
Great report. And now we'll have Craig from East.
Good evening, esteemed members of the Board of Education. My name is Craig Robinson, the alternate Board of Education representative of Cherry Hill High School East. I have a brief update for you regarding student opinions at Cherry Hill High School East. This month, we did our second student survey for this year. Considering the ongoing discussion of the board on ways in which we can involve the community in the creation of a new bond referendum, we surveyed students on their opinions on and knowledge of the past bond. We also asked students for their opinions on and ideas for the development of a new bond referendum. So just kind of an update for the survey. Of the students who responded to the survey, approximately 25% supported the 2018 bond referendum, while 31% opposed it and 44% either had no opinion or were just unsure. Besides discussions with family or friends and family, which were the top ways in which students were informed about the bond, most students were informed through Facebook groups, which was 35%, and East Side articles, school newspaper, 34%. Regarding the security measures mentioned in the 2018 bond, 40% of students believe security camera installations were the very most important, closely followed by the 39% of students who believed ID card scanners were the most important, and then 22% of students who believed security vestibules were the most important, featured in the bond. Regarding the infrastructure issues discussed in the 2018 bond, the most important issues based off of student responses from the survey were roof and wall replacement, which was 29%, and asbestos abatement, which was 25%. When asked about security improvements that must be included in the new bond referendum, security camera installations received the most votes, which was 63% of the student votes. 29% of the students who responded to the survey, who were 18 on December 11th, 2018, which was the day of the bond, voted in the special election, so that was 29% of students eligible. But 82% of students who responded to the survey said that they would plan on voting in the next election if they were legally capable of doing so. So that concludes the report of the student survey. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, all right, thank you.
I actually have one question.
Oh, one question.
Is this is this information going to be available to us in writing as well as the
Yeah, we can definitely share it through
Great.
email. Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
it's on a Google Doc, but we can.
Okay.
Yeah,
if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can send it to
Absolutely.
everybody. if that's-
Fantastic. Thank
yeah.
you.
All right, thanks, Craig.
And Mr. Robinson, I just wanted to point out that security cameras are in the process of being installed. So security cameras will be installed in East probably by the end of spring.
Okay. I'll inform my fellow peers on that. Thank you.
Great. All right, thank you very much. And next up, we have our first public comment section. And there's going to be 2 opportunities to comment. And during this first public comment session, you have to address your comments to items on the agenda only. There's going to be another public comment section where you can talk about any topic that you'd like to. If you would like to speak now, please identify the agenda item, speak into the microphone clearly, and state your name and address. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. The timer light will be green at the beginning of the 3 minutes. When the timer turns yellow, there's 30 seconds left to speak. When the timer turns red, your time is up. Please conclude your comments. Are there any comments at this point in time on any agenda items?
Ann Einhorn, 1017 Edgemore Road. Page 17, the termination of employment certificated. I'm going to miss Mrs. Joanne Riley. It won't be the same at West without her, but I congratulate her on her retirement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Rick Short, 1002 Chelton Parkway. The action item is on page 16. First off, I'd like to wish Dr. Malash, who's probably listening, a get well and all the best in our prayers and everything for him for a speedy recovery. Second thing is these. I'd love to see that the PTA is helping out with these safety mats, but the question is the safety mats that we have in all the other schools like Rosa and everything else. Is there any standard for it behind the basketball? I don't know if there's state standards, but this is one thing I don't know, but some people have talked to me about that. So hopefully we're in compliance with the state with mats behind the basketball areas, behind the basketball net. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments at this time? Okay. If there's no other comment, then we are going to move on, and I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. Smith for any superintendent comments at this point in time.
Thank you. My first time using that, you can tell. I wanted to make sure everybody knew, so. Board of Ed for the chance to say a few updates. Just want to say first and foremost, piggybacking on your well wishes to Dr. Malash, he is doing well and he's recovering, and if you would like to share your well wishes with him, if you would send those to Janet Cohen, that's his administrative assistant, and she'll make sure the family gets them. So thank you for all your thoughts. It does help. 3 shares tonight. First, I want to give a shout out looking back for an event that took place at all our middle schools. So that would be Carusi, Beck, and Rosa, and that's our high school course of study night. It was tremendous to see the turnout, across both the administrations from both East and West, plus our curriculum supervisors and Dr. Mahan at all 3 nights were there to answer questions from parents about what it's like to go into high school. And of course, the shining stars are always our students. We had students speak at each of the events, and it's just incredible to hear them talk about the growth that they've made throughout their high school years. So it was a great night if you got to be there, and if you didn't, even if you're not a parent of an upcoming high schooler, I would recommend just going anyway, because it just invigorates the spirit about what we're all about. And I definitely think speaks also to the advantages that we have as a K-12 district to see that kind of articulation between middle and high school, which leads to my next share, which is open houses at East and West. So tomorrow we have an open house at East, which is sort of like first the high school crew goes to the middle schools, right, during the high school course of study nights, and then symbolizing that transition, the middle schoolers come to the high schools. So tomorrow night is at East, and then next Wednesday on the 30th is at West, and it's a chance to just walk around and meet staff, kind of start to acclimate and orient ourselves to that transition, which is so important and which we plan for in many ways, including those different events. And then lastly, just want to say at this very moment right now, we have an East-West crosstown rivalry, friendly sibling rivalry swimming match going on, okay? And this is especially important this year. There's a Cherry Hill West swimmer who's battling cancer, and both teams have, this year supported him and raised money and done things together in a we way to kind of be one team, essentially, Team Cherry Hill. And so I brought the T-shirt with me that they designed here, and I'm gonna take my finger off the microphone for a second.
It'll stay on.
It'll stay on? Okay, perfect. So I didn't have to hold it the whole time? Man, I feel like that was a prank that you were all in on somehow. All right. we'll see what happens next time. All right. So the front and the back, okay? And I'm gonna kind of drape it here so you can see it, and then partway through I'll switch it around so we can see the back for a while, because it's just great, you know. So I saw those at West today when I was there. The kids were wearing them, staff were wearing them. It was really, really great. And it just, on the heels of Martin Luther King Jr. Day yesterday, made me think about one of my favorite quotes from him, which is, one of life's most persistent and burning questions is, what good are we doing for others? And I feel like, you know, our students are answering that question loudly and strongly through their actions, which is always the most eloquent way to answer a question. And so thanks for the chance to give some shares.
Well, thank you. Next, we're going to move on to our action agenda. And
Mr. Goodwin?
Oh.
Could I ask just a quick question? Of
Yes.
Dr. Smith, are those T-shirts available for others to purchase as supporting them, or do you know?
I don't know, but I will find out.
Thank you.
We'll find out.
Any other questions? Okay. All right. So next we're going to move on to our action agenda, and first up we'll have Dr. Wong to move the curriculum and instruction agenda items.
Okay, I will. Thank you. Well, it's hard to fill Lisa Sadel's shoes, so I will try my best. Okay. So the superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approval of attendance at the conferences and workshops for 2018-2019 school year. Number 2, approval for out-of-district student placements for 2018-2019 school year. Number 3, approval for summer 2019 programs. Number 4, approval of services contract with New Jersey Commission for the Blind and the Visually Impaired 2018-2019 school year. Any questions?
Number 5. Is number 1.
Oh, do I have a second?
Oh, okay. No, there isn't. There isn't. My mistake. Did you get a second?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
I have Mrs.
Okay.
Scaplino as a second, and you okay. Then any questions? Then Mrs. Sugar. Seeing none.
Dr. Wong,
Yes.
Mrs. Matlack,
Yes.
Mrs. Neary,
Yes.
Mr. Rossi,
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel,
Yes.
Mrs. Scarpolino,
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz,
Yes.
Mrs. Tong,
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Wong. And next, I would like to ask Mrs. Schultz to move the BNF items.
The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approval of resolutions, board meeting advertisements. Number 2, financial reports. Number 3, approval of Cherry Hill McKinney-Vento DCPNP students out of district placements for the 2018-2019 school year. Number 4, resolution for the awards of bids. Number 5, resolution for the awards of transportation. Number 6, resolution for the awards of change orders. And number 7, acceptance of donations. Do I have a second? Mrs. Seidel, are there any questions? Seeing none.
Mrs. Schultz,
I need to abstain to Bayada Home Health on the bill list. Yes to the rest.
Mrs. Matlack,
Yes.
Mrs. Neary,
Yes.
Mr. Rossi,
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel,
Yes.
Mrs. Scarpolino,
Yes.
Mrs. Tong,
Yes.
Dr. Wong,
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin.
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Schultz. And next up, we have Human Resources, and I'm going to ask Mrs. Seidel to move those items.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, termination of employment certificated. Number 2, termination of employment non-certificated. Number 3, appointments certificated. Number 4, appointments non-certificated. Number 5, leaves of absence certificated. Number 6, assignment salary change non-certificated. Number 7, leaves of absence non-certificated. And number 8, other compensation certificate. I have a second. Any? None. Mrs. Sugars.
Mrs. Seidel.
Yes to all.
Mrs. Matlack.
Yes.
Mrs. Neary.
Yes.
Mr. Rossi.
Yes.
Mrs. Scarpellino.
Abstain to item 3 as it pertains to Drexel University. Yes to the remainder.
Mrs. Schultz.
Yes.
Mrs. Tong.
Yes.
Dr. Wong.
I abstain from items 3 involving Rowan University, and yes to the remainder.
Mr. Goodwin.
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. Next, for P&L, I'm going to ask Mrs. Scarpellino to move those items, please.
Certainly. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approval of harassment, intimidation, bullying, investigation decisions. Do I have a second? Mrs. Matlack. And are there any questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Mrs. Scarpellino.
Yes.
Mrs. Matlack.
Yes.
Mrs. Neary.
Yes.
Mr. Rossi.
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel.
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz.
Yes.
Mrs. Tong.
Yes.
Dr. Wong.
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin.
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Scarpellino. Next, we don't have any items to move for strategic planning, but we do have an item for discussion and a report out, and I'm going to pass it on and ask Mrs. Matlack to lead that discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. Last time we met, we had a great discussion to start off with in regard to the bond and moving forward. And as a result of that discussion, we asked administration to go back and start looking at what those things could actually mean. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Sugars to give us an update on what administration has looked into for us.
Thank you, Mrs. Matlack. So when we met at our early January meeting, we had 3 takeaways from that meeting after a lot of board discussion. And those 3 takeaway meetings basically were to have some town hall meetings, to form an ad hoc committee, and also to take a look at social media and how we could use that in the future. So we started to take a look at this and kind of think about how we would structure that and what that would look like moving forward. And I think what would be beneficial, and one of the things that was not on that list but I think would be helpful, would be to do a survey. Do a survey and structure the survey to address different groups. One would be a parent group broken down by elementary, middle, and high school levels. A community members without children in the schools survey, and then a survey for employees, both residents and non-residents. We also talked about getting input from students, and we felt that some of the forums that we use now, where some of the administration goes over and sits down and has one-on-one conversations with them, would be a better format for that rather than a survey. So we would start with these surveys, 12 to 15 structured questions with an open-ended comment box at the end that would allow for people to leave any kind of comment or thoughts or input that they wanted to share with us. As that's going on, we would set up 4 to 5 town hall meetings. We would have those during February and March, and we are looking at a variety of locations, thinking that it would be good to be out into the schools, also to have them at different times of the day, have some in the evening, some on the weekends, and perhaps do one during the day so that maybe parents with younger children could attend some of those. So we're looking at dates, we're looking at locations, and we're looking at times to have those. Try to keep them brief. We don't want to take up a lot of people's time. We want to hear their input, but we know that people are pressed for time. Live stream them, perhaps. And really the purpose of the town hall meetings would be to understand why voters voted the way that they did, and what obstacles or factors precluded them from supporting the referendum, and what do we need to do different the next time. It would be an opportunity for us to get some feedback and observation, not necessarily to debate the issues, but certainly to take in some feedback and observation. We could start that with a very brief introductory informational session, sort of how did we get here kind of a thing. We also have, as a side note, received the voting information. So we're right now taking a look at the voter information, comparing it to see how many of our parents voted, how many of our employees voted, just to get a feel for, you know, did we get the word out and did we get it out to the right people. So we're taking a look at that as well. We would then have most of the meeting dedicated to public comments and have a strong board presence at each meeting so that, you know, you as board members can certainly be there and hear the feedback that we're getting. And I think that to facilitate these two things, both the electronic survey and the town hall meetings, we would want to use an independent facilitator. And we are talking to two groups of people right now to kind of see what best direction, getting some feedback from them about how they would structure this and what it would look like. I think having a facilitator there to structure the questions, to help us ask the right questions, to take some of the emotion out of it for us would be a good thing. And to kind of walk us through that process and just make sure that we're getting objective feedback. Try to get the information from all of that compiled and presented to the board, hopefully by late March or early April. And then take that feedback and all of that information, and that's where we form the ad hoc committee and start working with the ad hoc committee. Let them take the information that we receive from the public, take a look at it, digest it, go through it, and then make a recommendation to the board. Hopefully by late May or early June. And then at that point, you know, we could make some decisions about how we would move forward. Definitely try to make sure that that ad hoc committee is a cross-section of community members so that we're getting voices from all the various components of our community. And then use somewhat of a modified strategic planning process, probably break them up into groups and maybe have different groups look at different subjects within the ad hoc committee. And then as we've been talking a lot about the social media piece, and I think some of our struggles with the social media piece is we want to get factual information out there. And we don't want to get into the middle of the debate. I mean, some of the things that we saw posted on social media, it would be very difficult to kind of know where to jump into fray and where to stay out. But I think the important thing that we need to focus on with social media is making sure that we are getting factual information out. And when we see something that isn't factual, that we try to point people in the right direction to get the factual information. So we would work on that, trying to establish a social media presence that posts positive factual information and directs users to the district website for complete information. So, so that was the plan. We're still working on the plan at this point, but you know, we want to get up and running with those town hall meetings, hopefully early to mid-February. Once we have the plan in place, which we should have pretty much done by the end of the week, we would want to make sure that we are getting the word out. Advertising on Cherry Hill Sun, in the township newsletter, emails to parents, making sure that if we, you know, I think that if we can get the survey into people's hands, that they would be more apt to participate in it than having to look for a survey on a website or someplace. So trying to get the word out, trying to get that survey in people's hands, letting them know about forums way ahead of time so that they can make arrangements to attend or at least watch it if we're live streaming it. So, so that's the plan. We get up and running fairly soon. When we had talked about a timeline, if we are talking about a referendum in the fall of 2020, it seems like we have a lot of time, but we really don't have a lot of time. So we would really need recommendations to the board by the May-June timeline in order for the board to finalize their decision and then start working on project applications in the fall to have them submitted hopefully by January of 2020. All right, so questions? Yes, Mrs. Scarpolino.
In terms of advertising the survey, the electronic survey, is any thoughts to putting links to it on some of the community groups like What's Up Cherry Hill, places like that, so that
absolutely,
in case people aren't going to our site, but they might already be members of these other sites, they'll see it there.
Yeah, I think we definitely cannot just rely on our site. We definitely need to use social media, use, again, the township newsletter, advertise it in the Cherry Hill Sun, get it out there as many different ways as we possibly can.
Great, thank you.
Mrs. Seidel.
Along those lines, are we able to put a link on our parent portal? So when parents grades or excuse me, can't hear you, Lisa. Oh, I'm not sure. Can you hear me now?
What? Is it this one?
So my question was, can we put a link on our parent portal so when parents are going out to the site to look at grades or check homework assignments, that's also another opportunity for for the parent population to have access to the survey as well.
That's a great idea. We can definitely do that.
Sorry, and then one more question, and I'll give Eric his mic back. Is the intention, or has it, this may not have been fleshed out yet, but is the intention to ask people via the survey if they have an interest in serving on the ad hoc committee?
We haven't gotten that far yet. We certainly could do that. We could do it through that process or as a separate process. But yes, we will definitely, as we're advertising this, mention the ad hoc committee, and if people are interested, they could certainly let us know that. We haven't completely fleshed out the size, you know, what that would look like, but we can start working on that as well.
Will we be reviewing the questions that go out on the survey ahead of time?
Yeah, we can share them with everybody before they're sent out.
Regarding the student inclusion in this process, are we having separate town hall meetings that, because right now we have meetings with the superintendent or the acting superintendent. Would this be a separate process, or are we just going to talk about the bond in our current format?
I haven't gotten that far with Dr. Smith yet, but we can do it, you know, we can talk about different ways and what way we feel that would be best to get student input. It may be beneficial just to have a separate one just on bond.
I would agree with that.
Yes.
I think that's a good idea.
Mr. Rossi.
Regarding the ad hoc committee, I know you said that you haven't gotten, you know, very far with that. I guess my question would be, what does the selection process look like if you've addressed that at all? And I understand it's going to be a major cross section, or the best cross section that we can have. As far as the process, could you tell a little bit more about that?
Well, we would solicit input and, you know, ask for volunteers and then just try to balance it, I think would be the biggest thing. You know, do we have parents? Do we have employees? Do we have community members that don't have children? We don't want it to be too heavy with one cross section. So I think the thing would be, you know, how big do we want it, and then how do we make sure that we have a balance across all of that to make sure we have representation from all the voices.
And then the last portion would be on the social media. I know that you had said you want to make sure that accurate information gets out there, and you know you don't want to jump into the debate because that could be very messy. Have you thought about not specifically jumping into the debate, but however, address people with a link to either that question where they can go right to the website to see the information, or and being able to state, you know, that's a very good question, and send a link right to quick question?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the plan, really, to point them back to areas where they can get really good factual information. And, you know, you can't monitor it 24/7, and you don't, as you said, don't want to get into the fray, but certainly just trying to point people in the right direction and provide factual information when we can. Mrs. Schultz.
Just in regards to the survey, so getting the involvement from members who have children in the district, I think we have a good plan for that. But members without children in the schools? Is there a thought maybe to reach out to like the local fire stations to perhaps maybe try to partner with them to get like their mailing list to just see who they connect with? I'm just off the top of my head, I could think of like the fire stations or maybe the town hall, just to see like how we can get our survey out there.
Yeah.
For the, you know, like, because that's, I think our population of the schools is good. We can use like the sports board presidents, but I'm even thinking of like the swim clubs or some of the other places that may have members that don't have kids in the district that could help us with that.
Yeah, I think the township could be a big help with some of that. We can talk to them about how they distribute some of their information. I think that putting it in the newspaper, putting it in the Cherry Hill Sun, posting it on some of those social media websites will help us reach, you know, our non-parents.
Civic associations would be a good, outreach as well.
Mrs. Neary?
Have we thought about the process for reporting back to the board for the committee, the ad hoc committee, how they'll report back to the board and continue to communicate?
We have not at this point. We're still working on that piece.
Oh, wait, I have one other thing. Regarding board presentation, it says strong representation at the town halls. Are we going to do that so board members can rotate at the various town halls so that all can be in attendance at various points?
We will probably advertise each as a public meeting so that we don't have to worry about whether we have a quorum or not, and certainly if everybody wants to come, they can. We realize that everybody has, you know, jobs and things like that and won't be able to make all of them, but we'll advertise them so that we can have as many there as can make it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
And what's the timeline for the survey? I mean, how soon the survey will be made off?
By the end of the week, I'm hoping that we're working on questions and have it out very shortly thereafter. Let's put your mic on.
Is there anywhere we can, for the people who live in the community who have no children, but to get the news out, can we put in shopping centers? Or like in a bulletin in some area like ShopRite, I think there's a section for, you know, people look around so we can let them know.
We can reach out to them and see. I'm not sure if we can do that or not, but we can find out.
Right.
I just had one more question, and I'm sure, I know we're still fleshing all of this out, but perhaps we could consider for the evening meetings offering babysitting services from some of our high school students, perhaps. You know, one of the challenges for people to come out in the evening is that they have children at home. So if we're going to keep it to a short meeting and we're going to hold it in the schools, perhaps we can offer babysitting as a way to help folks with young kids at home so they can attend.
I'm sure we could round up a couple of good babysitters for that.
I know 2 girls.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You know, it was only 2 weeks since we asked administration to do this, and you know, this is a lot of work. We appreciate it. And we also know that you have a day job. So thank you. And we appreciate you getting back to us so quickly. And I'm sure we all understand that, you know, some parts of it just haven't been fleshed out yet, you know, time-wise, you know, because we need to get these other things rolling. So thank you. Okay, Mr. Goodwin, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Matlack, and thank you, Mrs. Sugars. Next, we have our second public discussion. This is this second public comment section is on any item that you'd like to bring to the board. If you would like to speak now, please speak into the microphone clearly and state your name and address. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. The timer light will be green at the beginning of the 3 minutes. When the timer turns yellow, there's 30 seconds left, and when the timer turns red, your time is up, and we ask you to please conclude your comments. Any comments? Any?
Good evening. It's Rick Shore, 1002 Chelton Parkway. The district's plan right now is horrible. Not good. How can you possibly come up with questions for a survey when you had no community input first? I would strongly recommend that the school board does not go along with this plan to do this survey first before you get any input from the public. Again, how are you going to come up with questions if you don't know what the problems are? I would strongly suggest that the board has 2 or 3 public meetings, listen to the public, then write the survey. You're putting the cart before the horse. Okay, back to my regular speech that I was going to have. I want to thank all of you, and I want to thank the district for fixing one of the security gaps that I've found. And also, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Athean artificial intelligence security cameras that are available to the public. What the AI cameras do is within 3 seconds, 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000, and identifies somebody with a gun in a building. I would strongly suggest that the district looks into this. I, as a just average Joe citizen, identified myself with the company in Texas. I've been in negotiations with them. Again, I'm an individual. I have some paperwork to send you, and since you are the 12th largest district in the United States or in New Jersey, I think you can do better negotiating with them. But it's basically $8,000 to test. How it works is you basically put servers within each school in their camera systems, and again, the servers work, and within 3 seconds, the police are alerted, and in the front office and either teachers are alerted. So this takes out the need for automatic locking doors, because when you really think about it, during the day, all the school doors are locked. So you don't need that. All you really need is panic alarms, and I believe that this security system would be great. Also, let's not forget the $2.1 million, Ms. Schultz and Mr. Rossi, since you are part of the buildings. Again, how's the grant money coming? That was just approved for $350 million. Is anyone working on that? Second part is you guys love to write policy, so what are the policies for after hours and security? Recently, they had a Carusi dance with the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and I come to find out that there was a threat made during, I believe. So what is our security plan? I don't believe we had a security. And the last thing is the coming up taxes. I don't think the voters out there want to see another 2% cap push. What can we do? Can we take some of the money from the fair funding to not tax our citizens anymore? Thank you.
Good evening. This is Sophia Lee at 500 Queen Anne. I'd like to begin with, I'm speaking on behalf of Asian American Alliance South Jersey, which is a group mostly formed by the Cherry Hill parents who has been involved in the Chinese language program and a few other issues with me last year. We formed this new group with the intention try to pick up the momentum from what we've worked on in the last couple of years, and one of our main goals is to continue to plug in and participate in school issues. One, want to have our input. Secondly, we want to be there to help. So as the president of AAASJ, I'm just going to say that from the last couple meetings, I really see a directional change beginning of this year. So you're moving in the right direction, or we as a group, in terms of transparency, collaboration, and communication, and just the due process. I heard today and in a January meeting last week, I think it's all good signs. And Mrs. Sugars reported out on her plan and outlook for the new bond. It sounds good. Logic makes quite a bit of sense. And of course, I would like to continue to plug in. And Mrs. Sadao brought up the babysitting idea to encourage parent participation. I actually did hear a couple of our parents ask me for this. I actually turned them down, thinking, I wouldn't ask, but you really has had some insights. So it's a really good thing. I wanted to make one comment on the schedule. I've picked up from the last couple meetings. It seems like if we're leaning towards a separate election away from the general election, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. One of the bases is the voters' ability to resist any distraction, right? I didn't really think that is there, and it costs additional money. It doesn't seem too necessary unless the data can be shared to say, okay, it's proven to be successful, beneficial. We would agree with that. So, I mean, everything seems like any successful project would start with a time frame, right? A good time frame. That's if we can collectively establish a good time frame and work towards it. I think there would be a very good chance to have a yes vote for the new bond, for a better bond. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jeff Potowitz. I live at 110 Kilburn Drive. Before the election, I was reading the papers, and I heard that that SFRA was underfunding us over $100 million. And when I heard that number, I was kind of upset because I thought that underestimated how serious this is. And I believe that there's an initiative that needs to be done. The board, the township, and the administration really needs to get a lot more money for us. It is critical. Let me give you what the true estimate was. And this is not including this year. We were underfunded $196 million. That's a big difference than 100. That's the amount of money we were underfunded. For a period of, let's say, 3 years during that time, we were underfunded $31 million, $24 million, $22 million, $22 million. And this is just, and this doesn't include this year, and it's just SFRA. That's why I think you need to focus on that, and I don't hear any of that. And really, every other week, need to make a situation, really focus on that. NJ Education Aid blog said that actually when you look at local fair share, that's not even. So the underlying amount of these numbers is actually worse when it comes to Cherry Hill. Cherry Hill is actually being cheated when it comes to calculations of local fair share. And again, that's in a recent posting on NJ Education Aid. That's what this is from. How bad is it? It actually started in March 17th, 1990. That's when it started. So it's been almost 30 years. There's an article, Florio's No Growth Budget Forcing Schools to Scramble. And that's March 17th, 1990 by a Robert Hanley in the New York Times. That actually said how bad it is. Cherry Hill was quoted in this. And basically quoted saying massive cuts. It's outrageous. It's a tragedy. With Thomas Redmond, the district's business manager, never in our wildest dreams did we expect this. We'll have to make massive cuts that will gut our education program or order a massive tax increase. And that's what we had. I suggest that you publicize everything. And if you want to do something has to be done regularly, every week, every 2 weeks, to really put pressure on what's going on. Otherwise, we're in trouble.
Thank you.
Hello, Paul Stanko, 700s Drive. I'm up here kind of talking about the additional funding for schools. I've emailed, I think, all the school board members here about the pilot agreements. Schools and stakeholders need to be involved in the creation of these pilot programs. Cherry Hill is currently undergoing a lot of redevelopment. I sent out the email with the areas. I'm not exactly sure of them right now. But it's state legislation that we can be involved in the negotiation, and the school board can do that. I've put in a request with the township to get tax referendums so I can find out exactly what areas aren't or have payment in lieu of taxes. And again, I'm only one person. You know, the school board needs to be involved. So in 2010, the state controller published his report, you know, citing that all stakeholders need to be involved in the abatement process, which is the pilot payment in lieu of taxes. You know, and it's just one of those things, areas that I think we're underfunded, or I know we're underfunded in. When I put the question to the school board and to the school, they came back saying, you know, you have to go out and get the information. So I'm going to do that. I'm working on it. But again, I'm only one person. You guys are a big board, 12th largest district. So hopefully we can get that. And as soon as I get information, I'll come back up with it. So hopefully the board can take this and help us out with, again, the pilot programs. Again, trying to find another tax source that's possibly there. I know you can't renegotiate old agreements, but you know, ones that are coming up, hopefully we can figure out some way to tap into that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Kim Friedel, 9 Gately Court. I actually wasn't going to speak tonight, but I do just want to raise a couple of things. First, Dr. Mahan, I sent you an email, but I wanted to thank you. She presented at Zone, and there was something missing from the presentation on the website, and I think within an hour it was fixed, so everybody really appreciated that. I want to talk, and I know some other people have brought this in the past, is the need for grants and grant writing. And there's cultural issues within the schools. My daughter's in 5th grade, and some of the stuff that I see and hear, I'm a room parent, so that means I get to go into the parties and things, really, really causes me pause. So while we're looking at security, which is important physically, there's a cultural issue as well that we really need to be looking into. I really link this to grants. I found a grant through the Department of Children and Families, a school-based youth service program grant for 2 middle schools in Camden County, one for Camden City, one for anywhere else in the county. It's an amazing program. The district would provide in-kind space. You would get mental health counseling and other supports during the day and after school. I have yet to hear if the district is even applying for this grant. These are services that would not cost the district anything other than space and utilities. Would address culture, mental health, different issues. So if it's a capacity issue that we don't have the capacity, then let's look at our community, because there's a lot of people in the community who have the skills that would be more than willing to help the district get these grants. If it's a lack of interest, then as a community member, I would like to know from the board, we're not interested. But I really think we need to look at these issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Andrew McIlvain, 23 Jade Lane. 2 things quickly. The gentleman referred to at least 30 years of underfunding. When I first got involved in the board in the early 1990s, Tom Redmond had a list of underfunding going back to the 1980s. It was $55 million in 1992. So that number is bigger and bigger and bigger, and the problem is much longer standing than a lot of people who have not been involved, you know, going back for that amount of time realize. And so I just want to point that out. It will require a change in the political will in Trenton to fully fund our schools. It's a good thing to go to Trenton. It's a good thing to put pressure on our politicians, but it's going to take a major change in the entire political system and pressure on the entire political system to make that kind of change. The portion of the state budget that education represents, I think, is something like 40%. it needs to be a lot more than that. The entire tax system needs to be revised. So it's much, much simpler than just our board members, who I think in our administration, going up to Trenton on for an occasional once-a-year trip up to protest. Protest won't do it. Political pressure will. Second thing, and I hope I have enough time to say this, one of the things I think that was missing from the discussion tonight, of the discussion that took place at the last meeting, was the question of open communication and perhaps the suspending the rules within either a public action meeting or within a work session. And I believe one of the problems that we have is that this is pretty much a one-way street. When we speak to you, you say, thank you very much. You might have an occasional question, but there are questions that can come from the public that could have a quick answer, and here's one of them. Is it possible, what is the mechanism for suspending the rules and the bylaws of the board in order to allow for two-way communication as opposed to one-way communication?
I'll say this. The main focus of the forums is just for that. That's exactly why we decided that, as opposed to trying to do that kind of communication during a board meeting, we have a totally separate meeting where we're having encouraging all the board members to attend, if at all possible, so that we can have that two-way communication.
And I think that's an excellent thing. Thank you.
Ann Einhorn, 1017 Edgemore Road. First of all, I'm worried about the babysitting issue. Do we have liability issues if it's contained within the facility, particularly if it's our school building? So please check that out, Mr. Green. I'm curious about finding independent facilitators. Do you have a protocol for that yet, Mrs. Sugars? Okay. The one area I'd like to see you try to reach are the senior groups at the town building. Okay, they're not large, but they can be very effective in trying to get the word out. The public library, I'd certainly have information at that desk. Of course, that's working with the township, which I'm sure they'd be willing to do. I don't know how you're going to structure the town meetings. Okay, and the breakaway groups, I don't know. What I don't understand is there is a lot of information on the website as to the bond that was defeated. Are we looking to add to that information? Are we going to go, if it's a personal issue with an individual, are we looking to expand on that individual's perspective? I'm confused as to how you're going to run. I remember we did it many years ago. We didn't have to do as many, unfortunately, but it's a different time. Okay, but I don't know about that structure, and I don't know where there's guidance to even help me understand it right now, because I think it could be a free-for-all, because emotions run high in Cherry Hill, which is fine. Okay, but I do love the fact that you've used accurate information, because that has been a real problem in the past year in regards to this particular bond. I understand the issue about grant writing, but who's going to do it inside the confines of this building? Who has the time? Who has the research abilities to do it? In the past, unfortunately, it's always been a self-sustaining position. Is there any money in the current budget process for 2019 to 2020 to include one? Because quite frankly, that's not a small job. We've tried to do it part-time before. It doesn't work, because that person's always drawn to another issue within the school or to help in another area. So I would love to support that if the budget could support that. But I don't know what the public's willing to pay for to give up in order to have that. It's a marvelous idea, but it has to be someone who's totally focused on that particular issue. Let's see about that terrible yellow light. And I'm going to work with that gentleman about the pilot programs, because that was always an area of interest for me. In fact, I have a former mayor who won't speak to me this day because I asked too many questions about that. So I'm here if you need me, okay, as a person. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jennifer Brumbaugh, 1758 T. Rosane. I just made a couple random notes. I just wanted to share some thoughts. As far as the grant writer, I think it was last spring, a few of us had a conversation after a Board of Ed meeting with Dr. Malash, and he had shared that at that time they were looking into a shared services agreement for a grant writer. So I'd love to hear an update on that, if that fell through or if that's still in the works. As far as getting information out to non-parents, I was going to mention the library as well. They do very, very economical advertising on all their flat screens, as well as leaving, printed out handouts at the desk or as you walk out. Another idea I had was the mayor sends out the weekly email. That would be the perfect place for him to have a link to the survey. I read that on a weekly basis and find out a lot of things that just never cross my feed. I had emailed Dr. Smith and Mr. Goodwin about representation at the fair funding meeting, I think is next week, and also the town hall that Sweeney and Greenwald are hosting. I think that's this Thursday. I would love to see somebody identified as the board representative and the district representative, that they are accountable to show up to every single one of those meetings. We need an advocate there constantly. We need to be a presence. Like Andy said, it's political pressure is what's going to change the funding mechanisms, but that can't stop us from kind of being the squeaky wheel and reminding everybody how underfunded we are. One last thing was social media. So for my day job, one of my responsibilities is managing social media accounts for a large hospital. And you can imagine the litigation concerns there are enormous, but there are ways you can you have to get out there. You're doing yourselves a disservice by not being out there and controlling the narrative, and also by not responding to people. Don't be afraid to respond. Just any response that's respectful is helpful. It's getting no response and feeling unheard that really starts to cause problems. There are some very economical monitoring software programs, since we don't necessarily have somebody to be monitoring things constantly, that will flag you. You can put in your own keywords. It will send you an email and saying this post might be concerning and something you want to address. So if you're not doing that already, I would suggest looking into that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pat McCargo, 991 Kingston Drive. I just had a question about these surveys. So you get all these surveys out there. How will you know how many actually reached and who they reached? And whether or not they're even going to respond or turn them back in? Because that's been an issue with this district and many districts, even within the schools. You have people who just don't respond. So how do you reach those people and get their concerns heard? People just don't want to bother. They'll sit and complain about it, but how many do you really get back? How many do you really get back? And I also have a question in terms of how you select this ad hoc committee, because you say you want a mix, but how do you ensure that? How do you ensure that? You can go to different groups and they don't want to be bothered. And how do you ensure that one group is not a larger capacity, who may have one point of view, than those who may have a separate point of view? How do you get that in place so that you ensure that even if they do respond to the survey, and even if they do get on the ad hoc committee, that it's a balance? Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if this is allowed, but going back to the reference of contractors and getting more equipment and security cameras, are we still not bound by state bidding process that we have to use who's on the list? Thank you, Paul.
Eileen Doran, 47 Bryn Mawr Avenue, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I have an answer to your question about the shirts straight from the pool, straight from the meet. Yes, tons of shirts left, $10 each. Send the sizes, and you can get them tomorrow. Okay?
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, if not, I just want to highlight a couple of items, and then I'll also turn it to Dr. Smith for any final comments he may have. Number one, there actually will be several board members attending the Sweeney Greenwald meeting on Thursday. As far as fair funding goes, we're really working on that one. We're not, we have to work through it to make sure we have the right representation, and we have the, do it in a way that we don't have anyone possibly be put in a position where they are not in the best light as far as ethics and ethics violations, etc. So we are going to work through that and see where we end up there. Also, we are actually going to be speaking about a grant writer in P&L, I believe, in February, right? So that's another topic that that we are looking to address. And those were some of the items that I just wanted to throw out there. And Dr. Smith, I don't know if you had any final comments before we end.
Just Mr. Goodwin gets to say thank you after each one, which is wonderful, and I'm saying thank you up here to each person that comes and speaks. We do listen and we do appreciate it. And just to add, as far as the Fair Funding Committee, we will be I'll be reaching out. We will be talking about getting a district rep to come to this. So thank you. And that's all I've got.
Great. If that's it, and now I do have a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Schultz, Dr. Wang. Everyone in favor? All right, great. Thank you, everyone.